Good morning again.
Good morning.
Those of you who are here at 10, I welcome you. I welcome the other persons who came in subsequently. Good to have you. I am Lenny Burke. I'm the Secretary of NIA, and I'll be doing some moderating for you today. This is the NIA sponsored presentation of the CPI results 2025 from Transparency International. And we are delighted to have all of you here. As you can see, we have both national and internationalist representation, and many of our fraternal organizations who we work with all the time are here. Let me give you an idea. It's a very basic agenda. After I have finished with these introductory remarks, we will have a welcome by Reverend Ronald Thwaites, who is the principal of this institution, and in a sense, our host. And thereafter, we'll have a presentation of the CPI background stuff from Professor Trevor Monroe, who is the founding director of NIA. And thereafter, we will have presentation of the 2025 results by our new principal director, who is Dr. Myers, who is right there seated. So, welcome again. And without further ado, I'll ask Ronnie Thwaites, who many of you will know. Long before the Ombudsman Act was passed, he was the unofficial Ombudsman for Jamaica on radio and at the Kingston Legal Aid Clinic, etc., etc. And he has very generously hosted us here this morning, and we are grateful. Ronnie can come and say a few words.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And welcome to St. Michael's College. There was a very trenchant statement, which I think many of you may be familiar with, from the principal of the Five Islands campus of the University of the West Indies based in Antigua recently. A statement provoked by the quickly changing metrics of the international political scene. And his basic proposition, to put it in Jamaican language, is that we're on our own. We're on our own in a way that we have not presumed to be in the past. Since there is a serendipitous aspect to being on our own, even in the circumstances, the unjust and cruel circumstances that have brought this about, are bringing this about. And it is that we must be extremely careful to husband our own resources of whatever type, human resources, financial resources, spiritual resources, in order that we can have a flourishing nation. The spirit of dependency has superseded the many years of independence, and some would say is hardwired into our DNA, national DNA. I do not believe that that is so, but nonetheless it is salutary that we should gather here to look at the issue of how we improve integrity and purposefulness in all of our personal and indeed our national affairs. I have a little experience in government in Jamaica, and I am convinced that the scrutiny and the watchfulness that is required to do this will not arise from the political directorate. It will not arise from many other groups in the society, and therefore this places a particular onus of responsibility on those who are described as civil society agencies. And one of the points made in the article, which I referenced, is that acting alone or standing alone is a recipe for failure and for takeover. Therefore, it's particularly appropriate that there be an increasingly evident and strong connection between the various civil society organizations in Jamaica, and for them to coalesce around such a report as is being presented today. St. Michael's College is owned by the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Kingston. We teach philosophy and theology and guidance counseling and other humanistic disciplines here, but we believe that he who we serve, the God who we serve, is to be found in the marketplace and has a passionate love for every single human being and for all of creation that he is the origin of. And therefore, we welcome occasions such as this and are open to be a hub for this kind of discourse and for events such as this. We welcome you especially then. Each one of you is precious because not only of your own individual acumen and commitment, but also because together we represent a redoubt. We represent a force that can in fact ensure that the virtues of democracy and of transparency and of integrity in every respect, personal, financial, spiritual, are lifted up in this country, especially at this time. So again, a warm welcome to St. Michael's, and we look forward to the depth and breadth of the program that is going to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. And without further ado, I'd just like to ask Professor Charles Monroe, who is the founding director of NIA and a professor emeritus of the University of the West Indies, noted political scholar, to come up and give us some background to what we're about to get into.
Sisters and brothers, good morning.
Good morning.
Allow me to join our board secretary, Lenny Burke, in welcoming each and every one of you, particularly, I may add, because the notice for this meeting was so short. And allow me also to express our very sincere appreciation to Deacon Ronnie Thwaites, principal of St. Michael's, and my longtime friend. I don't want to tell you how many decades we have been together from high school, countless, because of his hosting, yet again, another important event here at St. Michael's. To remind you of the background, each year since 1995, Transparency International, the international civil society organization leading the global fight against corruption, launches in Berlin at the global level the Corruption Perception Index. Following that launch, each of TI's 100 chapters in situations which allow it, NIA is one, themselves join in promoting the CPI and in indicating its main findings. To remind you as well, the Corruption Perception Index presents the assessment by experts, by business leaders, and researchers from 13 different independent organizations, including the African Development Bank, the Economist Intelligence Unit, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, to name but a few. And they assess for each country two dimensions. And in this case, it's 182 countries that are being assessed in the CPI 2025. And the two dimensions being assessed are, number one, corruption behaviors. For example, bribery, the diversion of public funds, and the use of public office for private gain, amongst other behaviors. And secondly, they do an assessment of each country's effectiveness in utilizing the institutions to prevent, detect, and to punish corruption. And I'm so happy to see here with us this morning the representatives of the major organized crime anti-corruption unit and representatives of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, who are two such institutions in our own country. We should therefore understand that Transparency International's role is to aggregate for each country the scores from these independent sources on a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 represents very corrupt and 100 very clean. We should therefore mention that CPI does not itself make that assessment. It aggregates the scores, and therefore CPI does not influence the independent institutions, nor does each of the chapters of Transparency International have anything to do with the final scores and ranking that is given. NIA's Principal Director, Dr. Gavin Myers, will present the CPI findings in respect of Jamaica. My brief remarks are confined to giving that background on what the CPI is, as well as to disclose the global trends highlighted in CPI 2025. I'll mention some of these significant highlights derived from the global picture. First of all, and very significantly, corruption remains a serious global problem. Some would even say a pandemic, affecting rich and poor countries alike, and there are signs that it may actually be worsening. The CPI 2025 finds that 122 of the 182 countries assessed had an assessed score of under 50 on that scale of 0 to 100, where 100 represents very clean and 0 represents very corrupt. As such, so many countries under 50, they can be regarded as having a chronic public sector corruption problem. In relation to that, in 2025, for the first time in 10 years, the global average of the countries assessed has gone down. The average has gone down from 44 to 42 out of 100. And over 50 countries showed a decline in score compared to 30, which showed some improvement. Amongst the countries which have declined, there is a very, very significant development. And that is, this included some of the most developed and mature democracies. In notable cases, for example, the United Kingdom, France, and the United States, to mention a few, the performance in 2025 was the worst ever by those countries on the Corruption Perception Index. In respect of the United States, while the data for 2025 has yet to be fully aggregated, the use of public office to target and to restrict independent voices such as NGOs, journalists, and universities, the politicization of prosecutorial decision-making actions that undermine judicial independence, these are among the reasons discussed for the continuing decline in that important country. No less, brothers and sisters, than 100 countries out of the 182 have stood still or stagnated below the 50 pass mark in 2025, thereby assessed as having chronic corruption problems. CPI, interestingly, in 2025, assessed that the health sector, hospital services, were amongst the main areas of national life across the globe negatively affected and citizens deprived of services to which they're entitled by corrupt diversion of public funds into private hands. Nevertheless, the picture is not totally dismal. CPI 2025 also highlights that serious corruption is not inevitable and identifies common factors or perhaps a blueprint for combating corruption. I'll mention some of the factors identified in this, if you wish, a blueprint. First of all, greater citizen engagement is crucial. Most dramatically manifested in 2025 in countries such as Nepal, Bangladesh, Kenya, and Peru, where frustration and discontent with unsatisfactory conditions have led Gen Z, the digital generation, born 1996 to 2010, have led them to transition from apparent apathy, apparent dormancy, into massive protests against corruption and inequality, sometimes resulting in the fall of governments. So citizens becoming involved and engaged in whatever variety of ways are appropriate is number one in that blueprint. Secondly, effective assertiveness by independent institutions, in particular NGOs, the judiciary, and organizations which oversee the management of public expenditure, such as, for example, the offices of Auditor Generals across the world. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly identified in the Global Corruption Perception Index 2025, is strong political will. Political will by political leaders exercised to strengthen the legal frameworks and effective law enforcement, especially against the corrupt in high places. So while the CPI 2025 shows that corruption remains a serious threat, particularly to democratic institutions in every region of the world, it also reveals that citizen engagement and bold, accountable leadership can build institutions to reverse this trend. And that is a note of hopefulness on which I end these brief remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor. Dr. Gavin Myers was appointed as the Principal Director of NIA, and as you have heard, we're a member of Transparency International, the local Jamaican branch. He was appointed on January 1 this year, so he's our brand new Principal Director, but he has had experience, a lot of experience with us. He worked with us up to 2020, and he was in the trenches at the time. So now he's both in the trenches and at the summit. Please welcome Dr. Gavin Myers.
Good day. How are you? I'm smiling, and it's not lost on me. Colleagues from near and far, yard and broad, our protocols, just blessings among us. It's not lost on me that today is my first public engagement in this, our new home at St. Michael's Seminary. And the mood for me is one of hope and confidence for the future, and confidence in our capacity to shape it together. I thank you for joining me and the team here. Welcome. And the title of my presentation is Languishing in the Doldrums or Catching the Trade Winds. And today's address asks a simple but uncomfortable question. Is Jamaica languishing in the doldrums, or are we preparing to catch the trade winds? In maritime terms, the doldrums are not caused by storm, but by stillness. No wind, no movement, no progress, despite effort and intention. That image, unfortunately, captures Jamaica's current position on corruption far too well. Jamaica's position on the 2020 Corruption Perception Index is at 44 out of 100, where 0, as Prof spoke about, means highly corrupt, and 100 means very clean. The score has remained unchanged from 2024. And this number, 44, in fact, is a number Jamaica knows all too well. We've recorded this same score in 2017, 2018, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and again in 2025. So that's 8? Yeah. So at first glance, one might point out that Jamaica is above the global average of 42. But this is not a moment for self-congratulation. Rather, Jamaica has not improved because of bold, visible, and decisive anti-corruption action. What it has improved for is because the global situation has deteriorated. So the question we must ask now, why are others doing worse? It's not that. We should ask, why is Jamaica standing still? Jamaica's ranking at 72 out of 180 countries, unchanged from last year, after having fallen 4 places in 2024, speaks to our move backwards. And we want to make the point, corruption is not inevitable, but when democratic safeguards weaken, corruption fills the vacuum. Internationally, as Prof has spoken about, the TIA's data, as well as our own experience in Jamaica and the region, shows a consistent pattern. Sustained improvements in CPI scores occur only when there is political leaders and regulators who commit to long-term legal and institutional reform. Conversely, persistent low scores tend to coincide when there is eroding checks and balances, when there is politicization of the justice system, when there is undue influence over political processes, and when there is a failure to protect the civil space and the failure to protect independent oversight. Jamaica is not immune from these pressures. Over the years, we have seen increasing challenges to the very institutions mandated to protect integrity, including the Integrity Commission and recently the Auditor General's offices. Public discourse has at times questioned the legitimacy, independence, and value of oversight. And even more, this risks the perpetuation of a malicious narratives and disinformation that has gained traction and risk the creation of a dangerous perception that corruption is not only tolerated, it is defended and normalized. This is something we cannot stand with. And this perception, whether true or not, is very corrosive and one that Jamaica cannot afford, now and at any point. But even more concerning is that none of the landmark anti-corruption legislation that has been long promised and widely agreed upon has been passed in the past year. Instead, what we have seen is disorder and dysfunction in the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee. We have seen delays where decisiveness is required. We have seen silence where leadership is expected. If we're serious about catching the trade winds, this must change. But let me be clear. Improving Jamaica's CPI score is not about just optics. It's about substance. It's moving, and the reforms are not radical. They are practical, overdue, and evidence-based. First, let me point out some. First one is the introduction of the long-promised unexplained wealth order regime. This would allow authorities to require public officials to account for wealth that is clearly disproportionate to their lawful income, strengthening the deterrence and restoring public trust. Second, an amendment to the gag clause, quote unquote, in the Integrity Commission Act. Oversight bodies must be able to communicate their findings responsibly and transparency. Excessive silence breeds suspicion and undermines confidence. Third, strengthening whistleblower protection. People will not report corruption if doing so puts their livelihoods, safety at risk. Robust protections are essential to surfacing wrongdoing early. Fourth, consistent investigation and prosecution where the evidence is sufficient of the breaches of the Public Procurement Act. Procurement remains one of the highest risk areas of corruption, and enforcement is a strong signal. In fact, the strongest signal that the law has meaning. Fifth, strengthen the move towards increased proactive communication on government procurement, sharing updated register of gifts, reports on travels, and external meetings of the executives. The resumption of publication of all the contracts awarded by government entities is critical. This includes the publication of contract awards by the Ministry of Finance, which is a step in the right direction. And this, as well as other forms of regular, accessible disclosure, allows citizens, journalists, and civil society to follow the money. Transparency is not punitive, it is preventative. Each of these steps would increase visibility, accountability, and build trust, the very indicators that feed into the CPI assessments. So in closing, I just want to say, Jamaica is not doomed to remain in the doldrums, but trade winds do not move ships that refuse to lift their sails. And so there's a mission before us. For years, we the people together have been standing, pointing to the losses that we face and the costs we bear as a direct result of corruption, lost opportunities, weakened institutions, and eroded trust. We're not asking for sympathetic statements or words spoken earnestly at podiums. No sweet talk to soothe the inaction. We're asking for action. We're asking for legislative action, not scraps and inertia. We're asking for bold, consistent decisions to be taken in the best interest of us all. For leadership at all levels that choose openness over obscurity, inclusion over exclusion, and one that makes a clear stand in Jamaica for accountability and integrity. For action in the interest of the country, of its people, and its environment. For being clear that we stand on principles to do the right thing, even when faced by powerful forces demanding that we abandon who we are. That is not beyond us. It's not too ambitious. It's not unrealistic. For as the Right Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey reminded us, whatever things come unto man that man has done, man can do them no more than we. Make a stand together. The choice is simple. Continue to drift or choose movement. Catching the trade winds require courage, consistency, and commitment. The tools are known. The reforms are identified. The time for hesitation has passed. It's time for action. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Principal Director Dr. Gavin Myers. We have welcomed you. We have given you a worldwide background, and we have given you the specifics as regards Jamaica in the 2025 CPI index. And now we turn over everything to you. Questions, comments, discussions.